Welcome to On Eagle's Wings. As I love to start the shows, God's blessing and peace, which surpasses all knowledge and understanding to everyone. I want to thank the greatest audience on the planet for taking the time to send me so many messages, contact emails, remarks. And I apologize that I have not been up to my normal standard of trying to reply to folks and get things back to you. Work on the other job has just made things a mess for me to really enjoy the conversations, but I do try to answer and I do try to get to the old emails from other shows that I was on, and I will continue to try to catch up as best as possible. But thank you very much for your interest, for the suggestions for future shows, things you'd like to see and talk about, and I'm looking forward to building on that as I have in the past for you, the greatest audience on the planet. The guest today is Steve Ward. Many of you will know Steve. We've been long time and long term friends for many years. Steve is probably one of the more interesting guys that I've got to know over the years. He is the host and creator with some other great folks right there they are, Andy Mercier and Susie Bastille for the High Strangeness Factor on UK Paranormal Radio. And I was privileged to be a guest, I think, a couple times on this show. But Steve has done great research in paranormal. He started out, like most of us of the same age group, with an interest in the UFO, now UAP phenomenon. He also then developed an intense interest in the Mothman. I won't say conspiracies as much as I will say the Mothman events that have swept up popular culture over the last 2, 3 decades pretty easily, had a resurgence, like many things in the paranormal world. And he is what I consider the subject matter expert. He now lives in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the site of the Mothman sightings and activities. He is a community member. He is what I consider a subject matter expert on Mothman. And I have convinced him that we need to get together on a regular basis on this show to do what I'm calling the Point Pleasant report, because Steve is in the middle of all things that are happening there. Plus, he has an incredible social schedule with all kinds of activities throughout the Midwest of the United States, all around the world of paranormal, Mothman, and UAP, plus just about anything else. So I look forward to having you join with us tonight on Eagle's Wings. Well, there he is, the man of the hour, so to speak, Mr. Stephen Ward. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you've had a whole bunch of what we all confront at this age group of upgrades and modifications being done to the body. You're looking great. How are you feeling?
A little gimpy. I'm destined for some knee surgery in the not too distant future, I think. But I'm getting along, getting the house cleaned up and taking care of the cats.
So there's a very important part. I had you on a UAP Crossfire show, and then we also had that night the Supernatural girls joined us, and on cue when we had the ladies on board, you had one of the cats crawl all over you. Talk about maximum cuteness factor. That was the overload. How are the cats?
That was lucky. He every once in a while he'll get on my shoulders and walk across, make an entrance and an exit. So they're all doing very well.
That's great. Those are rescue cats, if I remember correctly. Isn't that correct?
5 of them are. The first 2, brother and sister, were given to me by, in fact, Jeff Wamsley, who runs the Mothman Museum, his daughter Ashley, who's very active in the whole Mothman scene, I guess you could say. She's even written a book recently called Red Herrings, deals with the 60s, the Mothman, a lot of the paranormal stuff that was going on, and also some true, or at least based on true events, underlying mob ties that were, some corruption that was going on behind the scenes with the mob back in those days, which is something I knew nothing about.
Okay, so you're saying that there is a mob connection with Mothman. This is new. I haven't heard this before.
Well, at the same period of time that all this was happening, there was sort of an undercurrent of the criminal activity going on, and the book is fiction, but it's based on. John Keel is in the book. Correspondence between John Keel and Mary Heyer, the reporter. So there's great elements of events that happened. But it's not a documentary per se.
Interesting. I wrote that down. We're going to have to follow up probably off air a little bit on that, but I think you and I can say that if anybody was a made man, the Mothman was a made man in this whole situation.
Yes.
I would think so too. So, Sir Steve, give me the breakdown on how we got here. You're a young guy, UFO activity, the Michigan area growing up. That was the start, right?
Yes, I grew up in Michigan, and we had in March of 1966, we had a wave of UFO sightings. It wasn't just in Michigan; it was also in the Midwest. A lot of very credible people were seeing things, police officers and so forth. There was a landing on the Frank Manor Farm in Dexter, Michigan. Then Gerald Ford, who was a senator at the time, back up a bit. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who is no longer with us, but he was attached. He was an astronomer at Northwestern University. He was attached to Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force's sort of an investigative unit, but they were more wanted to kind of straddle the fence and kind of put fires out. They didn't want to make the UFO phenomena seem like it was real. They wanted to explain it. Well, he began to believe that there was really something to it. So when this flap opened up in Michigan, he went to them and said, "Hey, do you want me to go to Michigan and check this out?" They said, "Oh, no, nobody's said anything." Well, a couple days later, Gerald Ford, he was furious. He wanted to know why the Air Force wasn't down there investigating it. He had people from Michigan, very credible people, reporting these things. So Dr. Hynek showed up. This is when the infamous phrase swamp gas showed up. Because, again, he was tied to the Air Force. He was trying to straddle the fence. He suggested that some of the sightings might be swamp gas. And, of course, it was the wrong time of year and everything. He kind of just went out on a limb, but the newspaper reporters loved it. That was their explanation for UFOs throughout history. So, but in later years, in fact, I saw him 10 years later in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where a lot of these sightings took place. At the Weber Inn. It was the Midwest, the Mutual UFO Network. And they had their symposium in 1976. And Hynek was there. By that time, he had detached himself from the Air Force. He started the Center for UFO Studies, had written the book The UFO Experience, where he first introduced the close encounter categories. And his talk was a little bit humorous, but very serious as well. And he talked about some of the mistakes he made back then. Well, that incident in that spring in Michigan really, I was already interested. I think I had read the books of Frank Edwards, those great anthologies where he covered all kinds of unexplained phenomena. But then the following November, there was two couples that were chased out of what they still nicknamed the TNT area, 9 miles north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They were chased down a 2-lane highway by some kind of a winged humanoid, vaguely humanoid-like creature, 10-foot wingspan, red glowing eyes. And that particular report hit the wire services all over the world. That's why I read about it in Michigan. And that's even before Mothman had a proper name. They were just calling him the Bird back then. And I guess that's what really started it for me, was those two incidents really pulled me in, and I started reading and was introduced to the writings of John Keel.
Well, as you know, Frank Edwards was a very popular book in my house growing up, with my dad's absolute fascination with the subject of UFOs, late 60s and going into the early 70s. And you got to meet Hynek, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. You've had some pretty interesting meetings with interesting luminaries through that. But I want to go back on that Blue Book thing just to kind of get it on record with you. Are we saying that you believe that the Air Force was in just in a disclaimer kind of mode, or do you think that they were actively using disinformation, the word that we would use today, and they were trying to cover everything from their own secret programs, or using it to fuel cover for secret programs of, I'm going to say, a terrestrial nature, our technology? Or is it something that they were trying to cover up visitations, or all of it?
I think
give me a little more on that. You're thinking of Blue Book now.
It was more like a thorn in their side. They really just didn't want to deal with it. It was more like they were just trying to buy time, and they came up with a certain percentage of sightings that were not explained, but they. I don't know how to explain it. They just weren't enthusiastic about it, trying to find out what was going on. Now, if there was a layer of that, it would have been below that. But we hear rumors now about how the government has been involved in UFO research secretly for years. So that might have been going on. But this storefront, so to speak, it was just for public consumption, and they couldn't wait to get out of it. And that's when they turned it over to Edward Condon of what was the University of Wyoming? Boy, I can't remember.
I can't remember the school yet, but Mr. Condon comes there, Professor Condon.
Right, and he was supposed to take up the UFO research. Well, there was some kind of a memo that was intercepted. I think James Saunders is the one that exposed it. And the memo said something like, we've got to act like we're really trying to figure this out when we know it's a bunch of nothing, and we're just going to push it off to the side. And one thing Condon seemed to be doing is going from the extraterrestrial standpoint and suggesting that these things were not extraterrestrial, therefore they did not exist. Well, some of these things may not be, and some may be, but that doesn't prove that these things are not, that don't have some kind of substance. So it was a real disappointment. It was Colorado, the University of Colorado. And so that was just another whitewash, really. Another one just kind of biding their time.
So you're giving me an interesting theory here. I just want to pull on this just a little bit more. Do you think the people that were running and staffing the Blue Book office, so to speak, because I can give a pretty good experience, and you're a veteran as well, and we're going to touch upon that towards the end of the show a bit. You think the folks that were in that front office doing this public relations and investigation and presenting stuff weren't really highly motivated by this? It's obvious at that time period, if you were reporting and you were in uniform, it wasn't a career enhancer, or at least that's the
right.
The version that was probably going on at that time, that they really weren't enthusiastic, interested in doing that, just looking to do their time and get out. I get that. But you kind of now are laying the groundwork that this was just some kind of a master stroke of just causing obstruction or churning around. So I think you kind of lend yourself now telling me a little bit more that this is a more directed effort to cover things up.
Well, yeah, I think they loved people like Donald Menzel, who was a hard-nosed skeptic, and some of his explanations were even harder to believe than some of the so-called contactee reports of Venusians talking to people in the desert. I think that they, I think probably, we look at Dr. Hynek. He started out as a hard-nosed skeptic, a scientist, an astronomer. But after talking to many people and hearing their stories, he became someone that thought that, no, there's really is something to this, and many of these people are credible. I imagine that some of the Air Force people felt the same way as well. But like any other organization, I'm sure there were many that thought it was nonsense and it was a waste of time. And, again, I think the Air Force, I think they just collectively breathed a sigh of relief when they passed it on to Edward Condon. But I'm not sure that it was a big conspiracy. It was more like, oh God, just take this burden away from us so we can get on to real work.
Interesting. So this same kind of thing in effect, who investigated Mothman? Let's start there, and we can grab some of your pictures as you're talking. You call for them as you like.
Well, the first major Mothman sighting, not the first sighting. Now, there have been sightings of winged creatures or winged humanoids, whatever they are, for decades all over the world, not necessarily identical to what people were seeing. But that first major sighting took place on November 15th, 1966. And the two couples, the Scarberrys and the Mallets, and this is again, it hit, this sighting hit the wire services all over the world. Yeah, and that's why it was carried.
This is an amazing piece of the article here that you have here too, because of the rest of the stuff that's going on with it.
Right. It's the Stars and Stripes military newspaper carried it. By the way, this article, we can talk about this later, is in the Mothman Museum on Main Street in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Jeff Wamsley started it back in 2006 in a smaller building across the street. Jeff grew up there. He was 5 and 6 years old when the Mothman sighting started, and then when the bridge collapsed later, which we can talk about. But and these two couples gave interviews to the police department that night. And those interviews, those handwritten interviews, are in the Mothman Museum, and they're reprinted so you can easily read them. And I was able to talk to, now the Steve and Mary Mallet have been quiet since those first interviews almost 60 years ago. I talked to Linda Scarberry several times before she passed, and she never changed her story. Last summer, I had a chance to talk to Roger Scarberry. He's the one driving the car that was hitting speeds at 90. There he is on the left there. And the guy next to him is Jeff Wamsley, the curator of the Mothman Museum and co-founder of the Mothman Festival. So, Roger was hitting speeds of 90 to 100 miles an hour on this 2-lane winding road. And so Jeff was able to interview him, get a long form interview. And I was in on part of that, but it's under, I tell people it's under double secret probation because it's going to be in Jeff's book, which I think will be out by the festival. I hope so. And
this year's festival, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Which is the third weekend of September. And the one thing I can tell you is that he approached Jeff the day before, and Jeff was surprised. He'd been trying to talk to Roger for years. And Roger said, look, Jeff, I am tired of people telling my story and getting it wrong. So I want to set the record straight. And so Jeff said to him, Roger, just tell me, did it really happen? And Roger said, it scared the hell out of us. And his son was there during the interview when I was there. And his son said, my dad just doesn't make up stuff like this. So I can't wait to hear the full interview. And there's another lady named Connie Carpenter, who is mentioned in the book, The Mothman Prophecies. She was about 18 or 19, still in high school. She was driving by the Mason County Golf Course one Sunday morning, coming back from church. There's John Keel's original book, The Mothman Prophecies. I'll talk a little bit about that, too. And she saw this thing take off straight like a helicopter, saw the red glowing eyes, passed over her car, and she's given Jeff a long-form interview. So we're all looking forward to that. Just a mention of the Mothman Prophecies, Keel could not get anybody interested in the late 60s in on it. So by the mid-70s, his publisher or editor, or whoever it was, said, okay, John, it's time to write a book on the Mothman. So John had lost interest in it, John Keel. Right. And so he got out of there. He is, young John Keel. He brought out his tattered briefcase, went through a bunch of his notes and articles, and put together a book, originally titled The Year of the Garuda, because he saw kind of a resemblance with the Hindu mythology of that giant bird and the Mothman. The publisher said, nope, it's going to be the Mothman prophecies. And the prophecies are an interesting part of that whole story. But the other thing is, the editors not only changed the title, they cut out about half the book. So Keel was able to revive some of that in the follow-up book called The Eighth Tower. So Keel always had trouble with publishers, but that's how it all started. And Keel did write about the Mothman and gave some interviews prior to the book being published. But and when the book came out originally, it was a dud. It only sold a couple dozen copies in West Virginia.
Yep.
So it took the movie probably in 2002 with Richard Gere.
Yeah,
Really
I would love to
off.
get my hands on a copy of the original paperback that came out. I don't think they even did any hardcovers. That was
they did. I had been reading John Keel, and I broke out in a cold sweat when I knew the book was out. I hit the bookstore, and there it is on one of those racks with his dust jacket and everything. And I've got my battered copy with the dust jacket falling off, and I do have another copy of the original. Yeah, and then there was a paperback that came out a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, that was the mass media outreach, was the paperbacks, because for the equivalent of what would probably be $5 to $10 today, you were able to pick up your paperback books. I mean, and they were going through series of one book led to the next book, led to the next author.
Right.
So before we get too far down the line with John, let's grab a couple of the other early pictures to explain to anybody who's not familiar with this and the Point Pleasant, the bridge, and what has happened. Let's lead into that a little bit, and then we'll circle back onto John.
Okay, this is would have been very close to December 15th, 1967. Actually, 13 months to the day that the Scarabaeus of the Mallets saw this winged creature. The Silver Bridge was built in 1928, wasn't really designed for the heavy truck traffic of the 60s. And on December 15th, 1967, just after 5 o'clock, sun's almost down, the bridge is filled with rush hour traffic and Christmas traffic. The bridge went down. Now, if you've seen the film, The Mothman Prophecies, Richard Gere has a lot of time to warn people off the bridge. But in reality, it took 30 to 40 seconds. And it went down like a series of dominoes. And 46 people lost their lives. And if you go into the Mothman Museum and look at the newspaper articles, you see how, I mean, it's just tragic how, they found so many bodies and they've upgraded it. And then finally they get to the 46. And it was in the Mothman Museum, we have several documentaries running at the same time. And one comes from, I think it's the Learning Channel, that did a piece on the collapse of the Silver Bridge, explaining that it was the 13th eye bar that turned out was defective. Now, this is just one of the many displays in the Mothman Museum. You see that little magazine there, the UFO Phenomenon. We had a group in high school, a UFO club, I guess you'd call it. And it was actually Kevin and Rick were the guys that really did publish the magazine. Not a bad amateur magazine, about 6 issues. And if you go to the Gray Barker archive, Gray Barker, a very interesting character who had a publishing company. He's the first one to investigate the Flatwoods monster back in 1952, another strange situation. But there's a certain drawer, if you open up in the Gray Barker archive, you will find all 6 issues of the UFO Phenomenon, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Next picture along that line, explain a little bit more about the bridge and Point Pleasant, please.
Okay, this is the train bridge, which if you're in Point Pleasant, and it kind of parallels 7th Street and then goes over to Ohio. The Silver Bridge came right off of 6th Street when it was still standing. And if you go down there now, it's just the Mothman Museum is on Main Street and 4th Street. 4th Street is where the Mothman statue is. Now, if you go up to 6th Street, left, look toward the river, you will see a mural of the way the bridge used to look on the flood wall. You'll see a memorial, and then the 46 names of the people that died are embedded on the sidewalk across the street. This is on the other side of the flood wall. You can see the train bridge off to the right there. And this is one of the another memorial about the Silver Bridge. This was actually December 15th of last year when they had their remembrance ceremony of the bridge collapse. They do that every year now and have for several years, and read the names of the people that perished.
Okay, so a couple of things. We're kind of cruising up to our break. I just want to get a couple things into play here. How quickly was Mothman sightings and the events that occurred months before connected with this? How quickly did that occur? Was it something that was pretty immediate that was brought up?
With the bridge collapse?
Yes. How long did that attachment form itself?
About a year, because if you take it was November 15th, 1966, the first major sighting when it chased the two couples in the car. And then you go exactly 13 months to the day, December 15th, 1967 is when the bridge collapsed. Now, so there were many people are covered in the Mothman prophecies about their experiences.
Right.
Many people have. Jeff Wamsley has interviewed other people in 2 other books he's already published, that have come forward. And I know some. I've spoken to many of these people one-on-one, and some of them are no longer with us, but very credible people. So,
to me, there are no coincidences, but you have a lot of interesting 13s that show up across the line with this. It's always been, to me, though, the question has always been, well, who drew this together? Who put the sightings to that? And I would have to say it's probably Mr. Keel that probably is the one that probably put the most scholarship and thought into that to bring it together. I don't think this was a homegrown idea. Am I correct?
Right. He, if you read his grand opus, so to speak, is Operation Trojan Horse, which actually was published before the Mothman prophecies.
Right.
And that's where he pulls together cryptid sightings, UFOs, psychic phenomena, poltergeist phenomena. And he thought that these things were something natural to the planet, but he thought that there were connections to all these things. Here's something else for you. There was another bridge collapse on December 15th, but you have to go back to 1904. The Elk River Bridge, which is a little bit north of there, had a loss of life. I don't know how many people, but this is back in the days of horse-drawn carriages coming across and so forth. And several years later, there were another series of supposedly winged creature sightings around World War I. Probably no connection, and I don't know if that was December 15th was a coincidence or not, but very bizarre that 2 bridges collapsed on that day, even though the years don't really seem to
line up. Right.
Yeah, right up.
Huh. Well, let's call our approaching our first break here. And we'll continue to talk about the Point Pleasant Report. My guest, Steve Ward, now a resident of what I consider a very pretty town, Point Pleasant, New York, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Hopefully the West Virginians will forgive me. I spent a lot of time in that state working, and I really like the people, and I like the state a lot. And this is On Eagle's Wings. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back to On Eagle's Wings. My guest, Steve Ward, doing what we call the Point Pleasant Report out of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the home and sighting of the Mothman, an interesting phenomenon, an interesting cryptid, I guess would be a good way to go. I was told, and I forgot which one of the persons that I casually know in the movie film world, that the creature in uh, Jeepers Creepers, the winged creature in that, was based on reports of Mothman, the structure of how they made it go. And I've heard that, just brought up over time. Any reaction to that, Steve, as we jump
Yeah,
in?
I think it's probably true. I've a lot of people. I did finally see the movie a long time ago. A lot of people have seen the sort of resemblance, physical resemblance to them, or inspiration of the Mothman. Although the Mothman, while he seemed to scare the hell out of people occasionally, as far as I know, never killed anybody or
Right,
ripped anybody apart. So
right. Yeah.
he,
Well, I
the,
mean, Hollywood has to have their ability to have some license with the story to sell
he
tickets.
was a kinder, gentler Mothman.
Well, all right, let's bring that point up as we talk about the next part of this story. Was there any kind of physical interaction that's recorded with Mothman? Any kind of injuries? Any kind of good reaction aside from people being terrified? I mean, most of these folks, and I can understand it, were pretty shaken by their encounter.
Very little. A friend of mine, Linda Sigmund, was an original Mothman witness. She wrote a book called Beyond the Pale Moonlight, which describes her experience. And she, to condense it, this is back in April of 1967, several months prior to the bridge collapse and several months after the first sightings. And she and her boyfriend were about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant. They were sitting on the hood of the car watching the stars. They saw a strange light moving around. Later on, they saw another one. And as her boyfriend wanted to get the heck out of there. So they're taking off, but she's looking out the window of the car and she sees this light, and flying next to it is this winged creature, presumably the Mothman. I mean, it was his time period, right?
Right.
But she went under regressive hypnosis later and seems to remember seeing a pair of feet and even being picked up by this thing. And they had about 2 or 3 hours missing time. So it's very, very vague in her memory. I recommend you get her book. And she even had a sort of a Man in Black encounter later. But so that's the only thing I can think of where there was any kind
Possible
of
physical interaction,
physical touching. There people had other people had missing time. People saw it manifest in their bedroom. A lot of people had an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena after they saw this thing, in the same way that sometimes people that see a UFO or a strange light or whatever have an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena. And also you mentioned the idea of it being a cryptid. I've come to believe that it may not actually be a cryptid per se. A cryptid to me is a flesh and blood creature that is simply not recognized by science. Undocumented. People report it, but we haven't proven it. If we get into John Keel's ideas about these being sort of temporal or paraphysical, some of them, not all of them, and the term he used, transmogrification of energy, that perhaps there's something else going on here. Although Keel did believe that some of these entities were in fact flesh and blood, some of the various ones that have been reported.
Well, when you get into that, I don't want to delve too far into that. This report, we can dig into that later, especially if the audience likes it. It's not without some biblical basis of the formation of energy matter into a entity that is able to interact with us on this planet. So, I mean, there is some historical basis for this. And now in the world that we're living in with some of the AI and the interactions that are going forward, we're approaching that more and more, what we're able to do almost in an electronic, for lack of a better term, electronic kind of world where we're able to create these kinds of entities and things that we do. I mean, a lot of it's imagery, but now we've turned it into pictures, and we're very close to being able to put the two together. I mean, you've seen all these fantastic things we do with lasers to show an imagery and have it go. And there's also the physical manipulation of things like drones that can do displays and lights and all that kind of stuff. So the process is kind of at hand for us. So it doesn't surprise me. But it's an interesting take that you have on cryptid and more temporal kind of entity that's there. We'll touch on that in a bit. I want to talk about the bunkers in the TNT area and explain to folks what that's all about and what happens or has happened up there.
In 19 well, during the war effort, World War II, they had the West Virginia Ordnance Works, and that was a huge complex. And there we go. This is one of the old black and white photographs of some of these structures. The base of these structures still exist. I believe train cars would go underneath and load and unload material, but it was just and that's some of the remnants today that you can see. It just lasted. Now and they also had 100 of these concrete bunkers, so they call them igloos, where they stored. There's the opening to one of them, and you can still get access to some of them. And it's now it's been nicknamed the TNT area forever since since its inception, and now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area, and kind of a creepy area. We take people out to that general area on Saturday night for the Mothman Festival, the Mothman Hayride. But it became in the 1960s. Most of the structures were gone, not all of them, and it became kind of a lover's lane and a place where you could have a drag strip on the 2-lane roads out there. Now here we go. This is a typical Mothman Festival down Main Street. The big building on the left is the Lowe Hotel, which has been there forever. It's sold and being renovated. If you go a little bit up actually across from the Lowe Hotel on the right, you'll find the Mothman Museum, the Point Pleasant Trading Company. This is something I have. Actually, it's in my window now, overlooking the Route 62. I actually live on the same road that the Scarberries and the Mellis were chased by the Mothman. So that's pretty cool. But we had over 30,000 people come through last weekend for the festival. Here is the majestic Mothman statue created by Bob Roach. And it's a very stylized version of Mothman. It's funny because I'll work out there Saturdays greeting people. People come by in costume. People propose marriage there. This was an off season when the festival was shut down because of COVID. But a guy named Ben Burnell, I hope I didn't murder his last name. He's has the Hodag store up in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Wisconsin has its own folklore about the Hodag. And so these guys came down one night in their Hodag uniforms and were paying homage to the Mothman. They were bowing to him and everything. So, and he's a really good guy. He's got a great store up there in Rhinelander I'd like to visit sometime.
So what was the activity in this TNT area that occurred?
There's rumors that they were doing other things there, but they were certainly making explosives for the war effort, storing them in the bunkers. And the bunkers were kind of covered with foliage so that if the enemy ever got in that far, it would just look like terrain.
Right. So, and I mean, and if you've never been in a munitions or an explosives bunker, they tend to be very thick wall for obvious reasons. If you have something explode, you don't want to take out the bunkers around it.
In fact, something did explode over a decade ago. Some of these had been rented out to people, and some guy apparently was storing some kind of explosives in there that he should not have. And one night, it blew up. It blew off the concrete top, blew out the iron doors. I went down there with some friends a week later to see it, and wow, what a mess. You can go there now, and it looks very cool. It's all being kind of grown over with brush and foliage and everything. It looks like the dome in the Time Machine with Rod Taylor.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks kind of like that. So you expect a Morlock to pop out anytime.
I wonder what that gentleman was messing with to have that level of explosive. That's pretty impressive.
I don't know. I think he got in a heap of trouble, though.
Oh, I'd imagine that at a minimum, he had some folks he had to talk to at ATF. That sounds
yes,
pretty. Even to what most people would say, a West Virginia standard. He sounds like he may have exceeded or went to the top of the class there.
Yes, and thank
Uh,
God nobody was on that
yeah,
road that night.
yeah, absolutely. So, is there Mothman specific activity in the TNT area? Is that just the start point for when they were chased?
Once in a while, Jeff Walmsley still gets reports occasionally of people seeing something out in that area. There are people report all kinds of bizarre things like shadow people. Some close friends of mine have seen bizarre things out there. These like I don't know amorphous shadow shapes or what have you. Of course, there's a lot of people that have uh, indulged in devil worship and put all kinds of symbols on the inside of the igloo, and there's some great artwork in there too, by the way. But there hasn't really his heyday was pretty much the '60s, I think. And people ask, a lot of people say, well, everything stopped after the bridge collapse, and it may have, but the thing is, people's attentions were directed elsewhere. I mean, you had this horrible tragedy. You had people that couldn't get across the river easily. They had to go miles north or south up the river, and loss of friends and family members. Some good friends of mine, Bill and Jackie Kuselis, have written a great book called Bridging the Tragedy. And they interviewed several people that survived the bridge collapse, or they the way it affected them and their families in the town.
Okay, so I got a whole bunch of things from the real brain trust of On Eagle's Wings, my beautiful producer, Amanda, who's in the background, and she's not that familiar with this story, so she's a great one that's driving the ship here, so to speak, on the show. So she asked me to make sure that I mentioned Bill Edmondson. So we should jump on that, and then I have a bunch of kind of pepper you with a bunch of questions coming towards the rest of this.
Okay.
So Bill, what about Mr. Edmondson?
Bill Edmondson. This was the 2017. It was the 50-year remembrance ceremony of the Mothman, of the bridge collapse. And the gentleman on the left is John Lee, a good friend of mine. And we are in the bridge museum. And this one actually burned down. They've rebuilt it, thank God. But this was just down the street on Main Street. A great, they had all kinds of reproductions of the boats that would go up and down the river. Anyway, Bill turned out he was a survivor of that bridge collapse. He was driving his truck across the Silver Bridge. It's just started to wobble. It wobbled to the point where he had to hold on to the steering wheel to stay in place. Everything gave loose. He hit the water. He went right arm first through the passenger window. So he got out, but his right arm was useless. Now imagine December 15th, the sun's almost cold. Down. Yep. The water is frigid.
Yep.
And he gets out. The currents are actually pulling him up. But then it sounds funny at first. You know how gentlemen will loosen their breeches to be a little more comfortable when they're driving? Right. Well, that's what he had done. So when he hit the water, his pants were dragging behind him. They didn't come off because of the 1960s pant cuffs. And something caught his pants, debris or something, and started to pull him back under. Thank God he kicked himself free. He got to the surface, and a tugboat captain saw him and cut him off his flow down river, and they got him to the hospital. There's an article on him in the Mothman Museum. So he was 88 when I met him, and so he had to be 38 when he was crossing the bridge that night.
So Steve, you just kind of illustrated an interesting point here. There doesn't seem to be a lot of friction of the people of Point Pleasant kind of celebrating this Mothman phenomenon and having a memorial to this very tragic loss of life. There doesn't seem to be, conflict with this. I've been to other parts of the world where one place that comes to mind reminds me a lot of this is in Tasmania, where they had a bridge come down, and they have a small museum that shows when this bridge went down. Similar kind of story. No Mothman associated with her. Nothing I ever heard the short time that I was there. And you go through and you had dinoramas to show where it was, and it had examples, and then it went to the whole human tragedy of, the reason they built that bridge, and the economic impact on both sides of where that bridge connects on a river is huge. What changes, and now you have all this isolation. Rivers are not easy for fording boats back and forth because of the current. Really makes it difficult when you're trying to go, perpendicular to the flow of the river. But everything about Point Pleasant, your time there, since you've moved there, that we've talked about it, it just seems to me to be a really happy uh, and comfortable kind of merging of all these things that went on. Proper recognition of the tragedy that occurred, and then a festival that explores all this phenomena around this entity, this being, whatever we're going to call Mothman, that's occurred. Um, any thoughts on that?
Well, there was some resistance at first. It's been going on since about 2001, but over time, people have grown. Anytime, like when I was living in Marshall, Michigan, we would have the home tour, the old home tour,
Right.
and we all the people coming in, the influx. It's you have to go around town to get anywhere, so they had to do that, and they still have to do that. But it seems like they have really grown to embrace it, and also some of the big wigs, like the people that have bought the Low Hotel and people that are planning development in that area, they've recognized the amazing amount of revenue this brings in, not just to the festival but all year round.
Right.
I mean, it's a godsend because the area was so depressed for a while. One of the co-founders of the festival was Carolyn Harris. We lost her a few years ago. Absolute pillar of the community. Her restaurant, the Mothman Diner, the Harris's Steakhouse, was kind of the inspiration for the diner in the film The Mothman Prophecies, although it wasn't the same building. And she lost her little boy on the bridge that night. He was crossing the bridge with her ex-husband when it went down. Nevertheless, she realized that over the years that they could do something to get Point Pleasant out of this horrible, depressed state, this horrible economic state. And so she and Jeff Wansley co-founded that festival, and which, by the way, is free to get in. The only thing that costs a few bucks is to get in the museum, which is hard to get into during the festival. You'll want to come on an off festival day for that. But I do want to talk about the Mothman Hayride. We can do that later if you want.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in the end.
Okay.
I don't want to skip
All
that.
right.
So Mothman Museum open year round. The festival is free.
Right.
So somebody going there, what do you suggest? What's the timing that you need? You need at least one overnight. It sounds like, right? You get there, and you're going to need an overnight, especially if you want to do the hayride.
Well, the hayride is just the one Saturday during the festival.
Oh my! So it's an exclusive. Yeah.
Right, but Jeff has on Saturdays he has two tours that people can take. One at 11 and one at 3, I think. And what they do is it's either Jeff or Darla that take you all around town. You'll get some of the American history. They take you out to the TNT area. You can get into some of the old bunkers. So you get a combination of the Mothman, call it history or folklore, and the American history.
Right.
So that's during probably spring, summer, and fall. And there's but the Mothman Hayride, we'll get to it like you say later, is something a little different.
Right. And then you have basically the street area is open, so you have all the other kind of I don't know the right word aside, the attachment activities that go on. I mean, I've been to a number of these festivals where you have everything from your face painting to the street vending and all that kind of stuff going on.
T-shirts, food, and on
I remember you talking about some people giving talks during previous Mothman stuff. So if you're interested in doing some research, that is possible. Maybe not the best time is during the festival itself, though, right?
Right. We just to let you know, on the street where the Mothman statue is next to the museum, that's where the speakers usually have their tables and their books. They're very accessible. They speak on the north end of town at the Trinity Church. They have a nice venue there with a nice auditorium. And we Saturday and Sunday, you have speakers that talk on all kinds of different subjects. And they also, Jeff usually has me speak the last speaker on Sunday, of course, when everybody's going home. But if you stick around a little bit longer, you can hear me pontificate on the paranormal.
You are well worth the wait.
Thanks.
Well worth the late exit out of Point Pleasant.
We get we had Richard Haddam there last year, who's the guy that wrote the screenplay for the Mothman.
All right, so you've bumped up against this 4 or 5 times. I'm sure many people that have heard this show know the movie with Richard Gere. Give me your 30-second take. Good movie, bad movie, like it, don't like it, because you can't really put it in one category. I mean, to me, there's plenty of things about that movie that are excellent, worth looking at and talking about. Even the stuff that where it's just huge departures, from anything that was recorded to, typical kind of Hollywood doing it. But I think it brought a lot of attention to Mothman and John Keel that most people never would have picked up on.
Well, my first initial reaction. Now, this is the Mothman Prophecies on the left is the 2002 edition that came out about the time as the movie, and the afterwards reflects the movie. Okay, the one on the right is a 1991 edition of the Mothman Prophecies with the great Frank Frazetta painting on the cover, and it has a different afterword, but the text is all the same. Anyway, Richard Haddam got proposed a screenplay for the Mothman Prophecies. I think prior to that, Keel was getting screenplays that were just trying to turn Mothman into a monster. Right. He might have been another Jeepers Creepers, and Keel didn't want that, so he held out for years. But here's the thing: a gentleman named Brent Raines, who's a friend of mine, wrote a book called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. In there, he talks about he had a conversation with Sandra Martin. She was the literary agent for John Keel. She said Keel called her up one day, and he said he was laughing. He was so happy. He said, finally, I got a screenplay here. He says they updated it, but they've changed it a bit. They've got me married and so forth. But finally, somebody captured some of the original ideas in my book, and that was Richard Haddam's screenplay. And I was able to tell Richard Haddam that. I saw him at a Small Town Monsters event a few years ago. He did not know about that conversation with John Keel. So, and he did meet John Keel out in California, which is a great story. But so he told his own story, but I've grown to really like the film. At first, I was a little disappointed. There weren't, you're always disappointed there aren't some elements of the book in the movie, but you've got 2 hours to get, this great story in. So I have grown to really, really like the movie.
I have had the same reaction. I saw that we were still going to the theaters when I saw it when it came out, and I was disappointed because I didn't know you then, but I knew some of the story, and I had read quite a bit about Mothman, and I couldn't figure out what all the stuff they were doing in it. But as you said, the time it goes by, and of course, I can only think of one movie that accurately followed the book, and that's Where Eagles Dare, Burton and Clint Eastwood, and if the reason it did is the guy that wrote the book was writing the screenplay at the same time.
Yes,
because Richard Burton's son wanted his father not to have unmasculine, unaction roles, so he really wanted his dad to be in a movie where he was doing this kind of action hero kind of stuff, and that's where the movie, that's how they approached it, and that's how the author and screenplay wrote it, and they were writing it simultaneously. So you get a very faithful rendition when you're doing both at the same time.
I just saw that again, and the author was Alistair MacLean.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorite. Ice Station Zebra, Puppet on a Chain, Guns of Navarone, and on and on. What an amazing!
And he did Navarone, and this movie led Navarone, and he was just a superstardom when it went.
Right.
Incredible. Like I said, it's probably one of the best World War II movies.
Yes.
That really doesn't have a real thing behind it. It's everything in it. And Burton's just over the top. And Clint Eastwood is even more over the top because he looked at this thing. He wanted nothing to do with it. He couldn't. He could not compete line for line with Burton. I'm sorry, I'm going off on the line here, but you know that I'm such a movie geek when it comes to this stuff. So he
Right.
just decided what he was going to do with his persona was be very cold, be very calculating, be very quiet. In the movie, he does all the shooting. Burton does not. He does all the stuff that has to be done, and he does it in really, really short lines. And it was, to me, an amazing way to treat the character because of, just the magnanimity of the people that are involved in
Right.
it. Again, we'll return back to Mothman. I'm glad to hear, because I think that's kind of new to me, you talking about Mr. Keel's reaction to it. I think that's phenomenal. And let's delve into what goes on behind the scenes for the Great Hayride, because you have an active role and you have an active hand in some of the things that happen there. So it has a little bit of a Hollywood kind of angle to it, right? It's got a little bit of fun included in that. If you were to
Well,
take the hayride, you're going to see some interesting things and get a little scared, right?
right. Well, we take you into the dreaded TNT area. It's at dusk when we get in there. Night as we take. There we go. I'll talk about this gentleman in just a minute. But you have to now, ladies and gentlemen. If you'll have to get, this is one of the few things that cost money. No money to get into the festival, a few bucks to get into the museum, which is going to be super crowded. But you've got to get there early Saturday morning to get your ticket, your $5 ticket for the TNT Hayride. And we take people out to the old farm museum, which is across from the where they hold their annual farm festival. What's the word I want? The state farm. No, boy, I'm getting the fairgrounds. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, just they have the regular fairgrounds. They have the farm museum where they restored all kinds of buildings, and right near there is where the old North Power Plant used to be. They demolished it. And that's where the Scarberries and the Mallets first saw the Mothman. So we start people off, and now I go in ahead of time, and I cobble together some critters, I put up giant spiders, light up their eyes, put together different kinds of monsters here and there, a little bit like the house. Now, this guy, he is in the ceiling of the Mothman Museum. This is John and Tim Frick, the two brothers that are instrumental in doing the festival. They put him together. What they do is they take him down, and they hide behind what was the old acid plant out there at night. They run him down a wire. They have this ingenious low-tech hand-crank delivery system. They light up his eyes with battery power, and they blast a sound effect over speakers. I can't tell you what effect they're using because it's copyrighted, and they haven't paid any royalties. So I don't want them ending up with ankle bracelets. But I set up a few creepy crawlies here and there. But that's the main. That's one of them. That's if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, that's a Cthulhu mask. I added wings and some spray paint, widened his eyes, put in low voltage indicator lights, and hang them up in a tree, light them up with flashlights and so forth. So there's a few things like that around, but it's just a blast. There's three of us. I'm one of the tour guides. Jeff Wamsley, who runs the whole affair, is one. And a young lady named Brittany Sayre, who was a Miss, there she is on the right, was a Miss Mothman a few years back. And her grandfather was a National Guardsman that saw the Mothman. So that's the TNT trio, the elite group that take people into the dreaded TNT area. And it is, Cobra, it is so much fun, especially when you have the young kids on board.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. All right, a quick mention. You brought up H.P. Lovecraft. We have to just do a show sometime on him because you're one of the few people I know. I mean, to me, he is one of the most intriguing writers. I mean, he started out here in the part of the world where I live in New England. That's where he went before he went out to the Midwest. Very, very complicated, but yet simple. I don't know how else to describe it. But I will say one thing about him right off the bat. His work has never translated well to movies.
No.
Everything I've ever seen that someone's tried to do has been crap for better, maybe better when it was done for like young audiences where they were trying to put it together. But I what an intriguing, compelling. He's like another Edgar Allan Poe, but
Yep.
someone closer to our time. And he didn't seem to have the kind of personal disasters that's associated with people that write so well in that genre. But his stuff is just unbelievably complicated and horrifying, and has interesting positive messages just woven through it. Incredible, incredible author, and kind of overlooked nowadays. He just doesn't get the attention.
Right. Very quickly on Lovecraft, Horace Smith wrote a book called "When the Stars Are Right," and Horace Smith was an astronomer in Michigan. I'm not sure. I think it was University. No, maybe it was Michigan State. Doesn't matter. He was on my show. Great guy. In this book, he talks about the young Lovecraft and his fascination for astronomy,
Right.
and with the low power telescopes, and it was just amazing because they knew so little
Right.
back in that time.
And the information was even harder to come across. I mean, the
Right.
time he lived in, there was just no easy access to any kind of shared information, especially on a scientific basis.
But they also talk about his writings, and it's called "When the Stars Are Right," co-written by Horace Smith. Great book.
All right, so we've covered the festival. The pro tips are this: you need to be ready early Sunday morning. Was it Sunday correct for the
No,
hayride?
Saturday.
Saturday morning.
Get
Saturday
there early
morning for the
Saturday
hayride.
for the ticket.
And it's a huge price. Do you have a scalping issue that ever goes on with this? Do you have people that scalp the tickets? Is that ugly thing shown up there yet? You don't have to answer, obviously.
I haven't known that. That's just a little secret. I usually buy a small block ahead of time, and I'll hand them out to a few people. There's a couple I know that really good people, Brian and Terry Seach. I'm going to be getting them tickets because it is a little difficult to get there and stand in line, and we have to cut it off at some point because we can't do it till 6 a.m. So
sorry, so you have high demand Saturday morning. You have to do that. You have the museum, nominal fee to get that, but it's insanely crowded. But probably still worth to
absolutely
run through if you want to do this festival and just stick your foot on the threshold and say, I made it that far.
But the front part is like the gift shop. No fee to get in there. T-shirts, books, anything you can imagine is in there.
Okay. And we have, as with most of these festivals, there's a huge crossover, and this is the part that I kind of want to close us on the show with. There's a huge crossover of other phenomena. As we talked about earlier on, you have UFO people that are researched, and you have other types of exploration that's being discussed there, which I think is phenomenal. And I one of the things I enjoy that touches upon this last point that I always like to bring up when I talk with you, because you and I early on when we met and we started talking, kind of a similar, I would say, background. We're fairly close in age. That we started out with the UFO. That's the nominal name of its time. But rapidly, I started to come to the conclusion that these aren't separate entities. I actually found it kind of humorous when people in one group wanted nothing to talk about to the other group. Talk about your parochial kind of situation. I don't want to be echoing Mr. Dennehy from the day, but can we all just get along? And I mean, if there was going to be a group of people that were going to get along, it would be anybody who's interested in paranormal phenomena, right? Obviously, you have people that are interested in the UFO thing. You have the ghost part of it. You have the cryptids. You have all these other kinds of things that overlap. But to me, all of them seem to have huge areas of intersection and overlap.
Yep.
That when one's happening, the other is happening. And to me, that's something that you and I have shared from early on. But you had kind of an evolution on this, right? And I'd like you to describe that a little bit.
Well, in the 1960s, I was very locked into the extraterrestrial idea, reading, again, the books of Frank Edwards, Jim and Cora Lorenzen of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. They wrote these great books of humanoid encounters, close encounters of the third kind type events. And I was very locked into that. And then it slowly eroded with people like Alan Greenfield, John Keel, Jacques Vallée. And I resisted it at first. but the more I read, the more it made sense. And if we listen to the experiencer, that'll help us help lead the way to trying to at least decipher some of this stuff. But that's actually changing a little bit. There's still people out there that are very locked into, say, a Bigfoot, cryptids, or whatever, UFOs, and thinking they're very separate. But many people that were very, very rigid on that side have kind of come around and said, well, you know what? There is a paranormal or a high strangeness aspect to some of this.
Absolutely. It's part of the reason why I talk at the beginning of the show about being granted God's peace, surpassing all knowledge and understanding. I mean, if you have a calm mind, if you take the Buddhist kind of approach to this, you have a calm mind, you're able to at least look at all the other things and see where these things are up. You may not understand it. It may not make sense, but at least with a peaceful kind of approach to it, you're able to at least see all these kinds of things having this interconnection, this networking that seems to go on with all of it. So I always thought that was an important part. All right. I have one last picture that I wanted to bring up because I want to talk about one part of your background, and it is the one with the submarine. And okay. I saw this and I was cracking up when this happened. Okay, so this picture was in an article I read not too long ago. And the submariner that responded was answering a question about a boomer, which is the strategic ballistic missile carrying submarines. That's our really big ones, being converted to being attack submarines. And his expression was, that would be like having a B-2, which is the plane on the lower left, dogfighting with an F-18. Because the boomer, he was a CO on both of the ships in his career, as well as a squadron commodore. So what happened with some of our ballistic missile fleet, we turned some of them into huge missile carriers. They became a kind of a strategic attack boat where you put lots and lots of Tomahawk missiles. Obviously, in the recent events, they have been critical in what they're able to do, but they don't handle real well. And one of the jokes that he made in it is that if you made the turn, I would go back to bed, and in 30 minutes, I'd come back to the bridge, and maybe the turn was complete at that point, where in an attack sub, which is designed to go after other subs to try to take them out, obviously, they maneuver much more aggressively and quickly. So that was the story behind it. Now, I will say this. First, I want to recognize that you are a submariner, and with your great looks, you are also a recruiting poster submariner.
Yes.
That's why you never tell me anything, because I never forget. That's the one thing.
It was pure happenstance.
Yeah, pure happenstance and the right looks. He had the face, and he was on the poster for why good-looking men go to submarines. So you get that. Give us a little bit about your experience on the sub. I know that that was an interesting part of your life. That was, I think you actually had a pretty good time in retrospect overall. It was an important part of your growing up. And I think it's a very, very interesting part of our military. They call it the silent service. That tends to be a very, very strong brotherhood, sisterhood. Now we have women that are serving on subs in the U.S. now. Okay. So what's your thoughts on the sub and your sub experience?
I decided to go in the Navy. I actually, one of the primary motives was I wanted to go back to school, but I really didn't have the funds for it. So I thought, well, heck, my dad was in the Navy. I haven't served. So I thought about it seriously. And when I went in, I was intrigued by the job rating, the interior communications electrician. The symbol was a globe with a telephone over it. And I thought, well, that's, might even lead to something practical on the outside. And so they told me, they said, well, we're booked up. It'll be a couple months before you can get in. But if you go into the subservice, you can go in almost right away. So, and it's more money. So I thought, okay. So I went into the subservice, not really intending to do that.
Right.
And, it takes, by by the time you go to school and leave time and so forth, it's almost a year before you report to your sub.
Right.
And so when I did, they were headed back from the Mediterranean. And so for 2 weeks, I was a sub kind of a desk job. And it was some of it was enjoyable. Some of it was pretty tough, but it was, I mean, I don't regret the experience at all. It was, we used to, what the junior watch station I was non-nuclear. I was part of the forward crew. And we would, helmsman and plainsman was the lower watch station where you're actually driving the sub. Now, we're not deciding where we're going or how fast, but we're the guys moving the rudder and the fairwater planes and the stern planes. And we would, to pass the time, we would do TV trivia or whatever. And we used to always crack up about Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the most unrealistic depiction of a
submarine life, with wall-to-wall walking space, and you can have 3 people abreast on a passageway.
And whenever the giant jellyfish would attack you, the sub would go back and forth, and the sparks would fly out of the So
Erwin
it was
Allen,
a good group of people,
Yeah. Well, you have to be, and what for folks that aren't familiar, the selection process is one thing, and then getting through the schooling is another, because they really watch the conditioning. Some of the activities that go on for submarine crewing, down in the South Pole Station for Antarctica, NASA has studied for decades to help figure out how to put astronauts in spaceships and space missions based on the experiences of what the Navy did for this long time, being in small confined spaces with, large technical demands, isolation and stuff goes on. So there's a real honor to the silent service. And I always want to bring that up. I would say, though, that if you're in a big sub and you get into the quote unquote dogfight, you didn't do something right. That's what I would answer back to the sub Commodore who said the B-2 dogfighting with the F-18. If you got that close, you're asking to have your lunch money taken away from you. Should have never happened in the beginning. And generally it doesn't. Our subservice is pretty incredible, the things that they've done. And things that they're able to do with SEALs on board and all those kind of things. One last item before we go. You brought up small town monsters, which is one of the many little activities, I shouldn't say little activities, but one of the many activities that you're involved in over the years that you've shared with me. Some of these, what I would call smaller conferences that have got together. Tell us a little bit about those and specifically small town monsters, because it's one of my favorites.
Small Town Monsters, they're known for their documentaries. They have a Mothman of Point Pleasant, the Mothman Legacy. They do everything: Dogman, Bigfoot, UFOs, and so forth. And in Canton, Ohio, they have their event. There are just so many events these days. There's even the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which
one
usually
of my ultimate favorites.
It takes place. I'm exhausted from the Mothman Festival. I got to rush in and take down all the critters I put up, and then get ready to go drive out to Iowa, Van Meter, Iowa, where this winged creature was seen by several credible people back in 1903. There is I'll be going to one coming up in October. The goat. I think it's the Goatman Fest. I mean, there's so many of them. I've attended. I haven't spoken at, but I've attended the Frogman Festival. And these things came out of the Little Miami River, supposedly back in the 70s. All these little towns are embracing their monsters.
Right.
The big muddy monster in Little Egypt, Illinois. Right. It's a lot of fun. It's fun just to go, and it's really fun if excuse me, if you're a speaker. So I'm working on my talk for Mothman Festival, which is going to deal with an aspect of the Mothman prophecies that people normally don't talk about: the silent contactees.
Right.
These were people that firmly believed they were in contact with some other intelligence, and they were getting predictions and so forth. That's where the prophecy side of the Mothman prophecies comes from. And,
all right. Well, then I'm going to say the next time we get together, We're going to talk about that one specifically.
Okay,
We'll
very
pick it
good.
up from that because I think that would be a really good way to go.
And very,
As
very quickly, just a
Absolutely.
couple things I did not mention. In the Point Pleasant Trading Company, next to the Mothman Museum, if you go upstairs, you can play Mothman Blacklight Mini Golf. The graphics are phenomenal. And we also have a Mothman escape room, which I will not do because if I'm kind of known as the Mothman guy, if I fail, I'll never
Right.
live it down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to preserve the legendary status. And it,
Absolutely.
and we'll go back to another Clint Eastwood line. A man has to know his limitations. So,
That's right. Keep that facade going. That's what you got to do.
well, reputation is important in all of this. Steve, as always, it's a wonder. Thank you to have you together. Please check in, folks, for the High Strangeness Factor. It is UK Paranormal Network. I enjoyed my time with it. I really enjoy the crew that you're working with on that, and you have a lot of fun. And of course, anytime there's a British accent involved, it's immediately classed up. Things sound and work better.
And
Uh,
Andy's accent is genuine, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah. It's not well. He's a pretty genuine guy all the way around. So it's he's very enjoyable, and you have a really good crew that you put together on that.
Yes, I
So I
do.
look forward to the next time we get together. I thank you for this, and the greatest audience on the planet thanks you for taking the time to talk to us. Please remember to subscribe to both my guest Steve Ward's show and this one. It helps us keep things going. And again, as I started the show, I apologize that I'm not catching up as quickly as I like with all the comments and stuff, but I'm working hard at it. And I thank you. Greatest audience on the planet. This is On Eagle's Wings. That's it for tonight.